Today I'm speaking with Andrew Kavanagh. He's the co-manager of Cavalier, an award-winning studio that has produced a number of film and television projects for kids, including Pablo, Dougie Noir, Wildernuts, and Alva and the Trolls. Andrew, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I just want to jump in quickly by getting a bit more about you. First of all, if you can maybe share a bit about your experience with the world of kids animation.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working as a show creator for about 12 years now. As you mentioned, Alva and the Trolls is the fourth show that I've concocted for kids TV, and it's again a preschool show. So yeah, I mean, I've mostly been specializing in that space.
So you've had a think. We asked you to kind of come up with what you would say were your 5 rules for creating great kids animation. Can you just, first of all, can you run through what those 5 rules are that you came up with?
The first thing, that I wanted to say, which everybody says at some point, is to write for yourself. Write from your own interests. So I say create for yourself. That's the first thing. The second thing is Japanese have a concept called ikigai, but that's really about finding what it is you should be doing. So not just what you're good at, what you get paid for, but what you love and what the world needs. And I think that's particularly important at the moment. And then going beyond good enough, I think there's when you go to the markets and you see what's out there and you go, well, here's I need to be at this level in order to get noticed. But I think really the projects that stand out are something that have something exemplary, either from the conceptual aspect or from the graphic aspects. Getting back to reconnecting with your inner child, that's hugely important. And there's somewhere in there, there's kind of an 8-year-old who has completely crazy ideas about what's entertaining. And then I suppose finally change the world, no pressure. That's the last rule, is that to value what we're doing as creators, and without kind of sort of making yourselves like we're curing diseases or anything. We can do something in our spheres to improve how kids view and understand the world.
I thought it was really interesting, the first rule that you were talking about, this idea of creating for yourself.
You've got to be creating for yourself from your interests, from your passions, and know that it will sustain you. It can't be just something you think, the market might be in ready for something like this, because if you look at it from an analytical standpoint, you'll get distracted by something else because the market keeps changing. You need to find those sort of particular little hooks, that are going to actually drag you through the process.
The other thing that really struck me when you were talking about your rules was obviously that point that you yourself pointed out as being quite big, is rule number 5, the idea of making sure that you're changing the world when you produce something.
Sure.
Can you talk about how, in kind of real terms, how you are aspiring to change the world with your content?
One of our slate developments is trying to explain the world, what's happening, how the news talks to people, to younger kids as well. And it's like, wow, it's a minefield, And I suppose, talking about Alva and the Trolls, which was the one we pitched 4 years ago at Cartoon Forum, the idea really was to explain social media to kids who aren't on social media yet. 50% of 8-year-olds are on social media in Ireland, for example. They're not meant to be, but they are, So there are conversations to be had. But there was a kind of a fear, I think, about how to have that conversation with kids. Not an easy one to convince other people to invest in.
How do you go about having those conversations?
I would say talk to, even before you even talk to the market, and the broadcasters, I would say have conversations with parents and teachers and so on, just to see what they think. But really, there's no hard and fast way. I mean, I've had lots of ideas there, and some of them I pitch as a joke, almost, to see what the reaction will be. And then, you never know what's going to land.
I just wanted to get your opinion when you're thinking about these kind of great kids animation. What kind of components do you think are essential when it comes to making a great animation?
The shortest mnemonic for this, I think Nickelodeon came up with, which was we look for 3 things: heart, smart, fart. It's like that's as good as it gets, really. Something that has, heart to us, where the main character is kind of somebody you can relate to. Something that is smart, something that addresses the kind of, or speaks to the kind of an intellectual capacity of your audience in a way that isn't sort of talking down to them. And not being too overly kind of cautious about, will kids get that, And then the fart bit, which was, just parts, basically. It's got to have some sort of rudeness to it, you know. Now I would add, you know, another one to that as well, which is, you know, this kind of, in what way is the show sort of creating a sort of a cultural, even if it's a subversive or seditious kind of cultural message, you know, is there something in there that hasn't been done before in the space, you know? And you should always try to do that. You should always try and sneak something in, you know, like a little Trojan horse that's never been done on a kid's show before. And there's plenty of things. So I'm always delighted when I see somebody who's put in something that's kind of culturally progressive in a show that might be just very kind of slapstick and silly in other ways, but, you know, takes that step to kind of to helping to normalize something that may have been, you know, taboo 10 years ago.
Does that tie into this idea in your third rule about kind of quality? Is that what you mean by kind of creating quality content, or are you talking about something else?
The idea of quality is shifting away from necessarily being a financial quality idea alone. For me, the quality idea is a very immediate thing, particularly in lockdown. And I've become very much kind of interested in what's going on TikTok, because just seeing these incredibly creative, quick ideas coming through in like 10-second bursts. I'm kind of finding myself watching more and more of that content, and I'm 47. So, you know, you can imagine, like, you know, young people are probably like, do we really care that, you know, that cost 20 million to make that show or whatever it might be? You know, when this is where my attention is being drawn.
So when you're talking about creating high quality content, it isn't a highly polished, highly produced thing.
Yeah.
It's the quality comes from the idea.
I think there is definitely still a value to doing that. If you're moving into, you know, the kind of the higher polished, you know, the feature film type space, you really need to be working hard to make that notice. But it, you know, can be more from a graphic rather than a high-end animation. You don't have to spend an absolute fortune, you know, if it grabs your attention.
As we're running out of time, I think we'll have to finish it there. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me. It's been fascinating.
Well, thank you, Sam. It's been a pleasure.
This afternoon, I'm speaking to Rebecca Hobbs. She is a freelance writer and creative consultant. She was previously the head writer on the show Sadie Sparks and has a lot of exciting new programs coming down the pipeline. Rebecca, how are you?
I am good, thank you, in this weird world we're living in now.
I just want to kick off quickly. If you could just tell me a bit about yourself, maybe your work in the kids' animation space.
Yeah, I came to animation quite late. I started out as an actress back in New Zealand, and found that I started writing. There's a lot of time when you're acting. First theatre, and then actually adult television series. And it wasn't actually until I moved to Disney in 2009 that I moved into animation. And it was like a learning curve like that. Super fast, super fun. And I realised that, you know, I loved it.
What 5 rules do you think are key when creating great kids animations?
I was thinking about this, and I got, write what you're best at, do what you're best at, because you'll always be better at it than you will be at the things that you don't like as much, you're not drawn to as much, that don't inspire you as much. The second one is don't sand all the edges off. And that comes from a piece of advice that I got from my old boss, Orion Ross at Disney. It's about keeping the core of what you're doing, even as people try, you know, and everyone's trying to change it a little bit more this, a little bit less that. And it's a tricky one because you often don't want to constantly question yourself, constantly question whether what you're doing is relevant to kids now, because, you know, we do grow up and we, you know, times do change. So you've got to make sure that it's still fresh and it's still relevant to them. The fourth one is, I think, is sort of practical and obvious. Work with really nice people and then work with them again and again and again. And the fifth one was a discovery that along the way, which is accept that you won't know everything at the start, particularly at the start of a series. You know, you've done all that development and you feel like you really know stuff. But as you go into the scripting process, for me, I discover so much more about the characters then. And I've discovered that if I do know everything at the beginning, it's quite safe and boring and limited. It's not going to be exciting.
We were talking about these rules before our conversation here. You mentioned that it's important for a show to be funny and smart with heart. What do you think gives a show that heart?
For me, the heart comes from character. In a weird way, the characters that we write have to have a core of decency because you get them to do the wackiest things. But if they've got, really loyal friendships and they care about each other and they care about the things they do and the other characters in their lives, then there's going to be, for me, a beating heart at the core of the whole thing.
I really like the idea that you had later on as well. The idea that, accepting that you don't know everything straight away. And through that, there is this process of discovery and surprise.
You're still finding out stuff about the characters even as you start writing the scripts. Even as you start, you write script 3 and script 10, you're still finding out new stuff. That really came home to me when we were starting the scripting for Sadie. We were casting for Gilbert, and I was struggling to tell the writers and struggling to tell the actors who were auditioning for this character, Gilbert, what was behind his grumpiness? Why is he so grumpy? And we were getting all these auditions that were quite downbeat and a bit depressing, and we were like, oh gosh, what's going to be like? And then I came across a YouTube clip of Rufus Hound that someone sent to me going, what, do you want to see this actor? And he was having a really energetic, really enjoyable moan about X Factor judges. And I suddenly went, yes, that's it. Gilbert loves a moan. Gilbert actively loves a moan, and it's changed the character completely and made him much more fun, much more energetic, and also we got our actor.
I also thought it was interesting when you were talking about not sanding the edges off. It's a kind of a different side of this question. How do you create relevancy? How do you speak to the various modern lifestyles of kids that may be difficult to articulate traditionally in a kids show?
Kids want to see themselves on screen. And in a cartoon, that can mean anything. That can mean characters that literally look like them, or it can mean an animal or an alien or a sock puppet that feels like them. I have to constantly sort of check that we're doing that. So in Sadie, Brona, one of her many genius ideas, she was really sure that she wanted Sadie's mom to be a single working mom. What was great about it was that, it felt real. It made quite a traditional sitcom feel just a little bit more messy and a little bit more real, because we had this loving but massively harried mum just sort of fusking around in the background, never really seeing what goes on, but for reasons you could understand. She's got all the balls in the air. She's trying to juggle her daily life,
Tapping into that realism is so important when it comes to kids shows. And I guess the other side of that realism is there is this kind of willingness sometimes in kids animations to talk about things that are not, that are a bit more socially progressive, or that are taking the cultural conversation in new ways. I know that's something that you've been talking about both kind of before our conversation and here as well, but how do you do that kind of in a safe and responsible way for kids?
I think it comes down to that balance of trusting yourself and listening to kids, constantly talking to kids, testing your stuff out on them. For me, it's about keeping a sort of modern truth to the characters. What makes them exciting but also feel real? Sometimes you can squish the characters into what the plot of the story is trying to do, and it never feels as good as if the character is being true to themselves. We had a story that we really liked, a school dance story where Wizard Sadie doesn't get invited to the school dance, and so she wants to conjure a hot date from an old doll. And we were like, all the stuff that happened after that beginning bit was great. It was fantastic. But we all really got sort of like about this whole, Sadie hasn't got a date for the dance, so what's she going to do? Why are we treating her like a 1950s, girl? She's a modern young woman. She can go with her mates, or she can go on her own. Why does she have to wait around for a bloke to ask her? It was such a good story in the end, but if we hadn't changed that, it wouldn't have felt right for her at all.
I mean, Rebecca, I could probably talk to you all day about this, but I am very cognizant of time. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. This has been like a really fascinating chat, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, pleasure. Pleasure. Lovely to speak to you too.
I'm speaking with Sophie Dean. Sophie is the CEO and founder of kids media company Bright Little Labs. They have a new book in their new Agent Asha series coming out in July with an accompanying app and subscription package as well. Yes, that book right there. Sophie, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. So today we're talking about your 5 rules for creating kind of great kids cartoons. I just want to start by running through those rules.
Rule number 1 is think about why you're doing it in the first place and if you believe in the reason why you're doing it. Practically speaking, I think that when times are hard or when you're not sure how to make a decision, for me, going back to why I'm doing it can help me make hard decisions. Rule number 2 is create something that you're really passionate about, because it's going to be hard work and you're going to question why you even exist halfway through, so you need to care. Rule number 3 is make sure that your characters are diverse in the broadest sense of that word. And that means not only do they look diverse in front of the screen, but is there diversity in people creating those characters behind the screens? Rule number 4 is be careful about the generic grey. You start getting feedback from everybody, and sometimes it can feel like it's just going to have all of the personality removed and just become like a beige thing that offends nobody and pleases nobody either. And my final rule is think about the bigger world that you're creating and think about the full logic of what you're doing, because from kids' point of view, whatever you're presenting to them, it means something to them in their own day-to-day life. It doesn't just end when their interaction with you ends. So I think that it's good to think about that bigger world.
Diversity was key in your rules. If you were giving advice to brands or creators who are working in this space and who are trying to create diverse content, what advice would you give them to ensure that they're kind of making this kind of content in a diverse way?
Make it an absolute priority to build teams that have a diversity of voices and backgrounds and experiences in them. And that can be really hard, but think of it as a higher priority as anything else, because I think that that's the only way that you're going to successfully tell diverse stories. So on Asha, our character, she is British Indian. And so the way that we've thought about Asha is not only in sort of hiring a team of, we have an exec producer, writers, illustrators, and the exec producer had lived experience of our character, but we also we created an Agent Asha character council. We spoke to grandparents from Pakistan, from India, and all of the kids, all of the grandkids, and they regularly fed into the conversations that the characters would be having around the dinner table, the way that they looked, her eyebrows have been hotly debated. You can't imagine how many conversations we had about our characters' eyebrows. That's how we did it, and hiring for that was really difficult. So we have some wording on our job descriptions that's really inclusive. So we say we value merit over qualifications. Don't even worry about it if you don't have any qualifications. We don't either. Like, if you're not sure if you fit, apply. We advertise in places where we think that there are more people of colour or more people. Like, we go to Wembley. We made friends with the temples in Wembley, the Hindu temples, and then they helped us go out to their communities to find people to help us tell the stories, or artists or storytellers within their communities. We've made an effort, and I think it's something that we're proud of, because I think that the story that we're telling just feels much more authentic because of it.
That taps into, I think, in my perspective, your last rule, the idea of world creating and the idea of building a bigger space around the characters that are at the foreground of your story. Yes. People who are maybe just starting out in the kids industry, how would you suggest that they go about creating these kind of vibrant, rich worlds?
So we have a spy agency, and it's a real spy agency. It's called the Children's Spy Agency. We have kids in about 100 countries in it. We never, ever, ever break the fourth wall. And we're consistent. Every single thing that we ever do is cross-referenced against other things. So there's not 2 different protocols. There's not a protocol in the book that's different from the protocol in the animation. We go the extra mile to have little Easter eggs that no one is really going to see, but if they were going to check if things are real, they are real. They're really there. The nemesis of the CSA is this she's a teenage trillionaire. She's called Shelley Belly. We'll do stuff like create a LinkedIn profile for her, because she has a LinkedIn profile, because she's a real character. I think if you're a kid and you're in the CSA, it's so exciting to you because you're in a real spy agency and you can verify that. I think that makes the whole world so much richer, and within that construct, you can go anywhere you like in your imagination.
So when we were talking about this before, it was interesting where you had this kind of divide, it felt, between following your gut and avoiding that kind of gray space, but also recognizing that there's quite a lot of insight and data out there that you can follow when it comes to kind of creating things. How do you justify those two? How do you bring them together?
The thing that I think all creators should do is be able to think about what's meaningful to them and then be conscious about including that or not including that in what they're creating. That's one thing that as a new creator I think was really hard, because you have everyone saying to you, make her skinnier, make her pinker, give her a younger brother. Everybody's going to the middle, like the safe middle. For me, going with my gut became an important part of creating something I believed in. Like, go and do research with kids, because you just get so much from like watching kids interact with your stuff. But your gut is your North Star, and actually it's really important to go with that, because the risk otherwise is to create something quite beige.
The last thing I really wanted to talk about, and I think it's a hugely important thing, something you've already talked about a bit, is the idea of future facing. Creating content, creating products that will continue to be relevant for kids. Kind of at a brass tacks level, how does that influence the way you create assets at Bright Little Labs?
On a day-to-day basis, we're thinking about how to be super efficient and lean. We try and be really efficient and think ahead about where our assets are going to end up. So we know that we want kids to interact as a game with our stuff. So we're exploring making animations in the Unity games engine and having this one asset base within Unity so that you can flatten it and create a cartoon, but that you can also import those assets directly into a game experience. If you look at how media is going today, if you're thinking that your one asset base might be used as a live experience, a book, a short form YouTube series, a broadcast series, like there's so many different ways that media can play out. And if you're a kid, you expect it to be everywhere. Like, you're not like, this character only exists here. You're like, this, I'm here, and so is everything I think about.
Well, Sophie, it has been absolutely fantastic speaking with you today. It's just been really, really interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
So to wrap everything up for my last interview, I'm speaking with the co-founders of Hook Research, Debbie Bray and Nick Fisher. How are you both doing?
Very well, thanks, Sam.
When I shared these interviews with you before, you came up with a few different themes that you felt crossed all of these different interviews. And the first one was this idea of just how important it is to have strong characters in kids' animation.
Yes, I think one of the themes that came across from all the creators was creating something that you really care about.
That care will lead to characters that not only reflect kids' lives, but have kind of an innate respect for them as consumers as well.
I think for kids it's really important to create a compelling character, and a character that kids will naturally care about. So whether that's a character that's got skills or powers that feel quite aspirant to kids, or whether it's a character that has really clear traits that kids understand and that can buy into.
It's particularly interesting when you look at a character like Shelley Belly, who Sophie mentioned as having her own LinkedIn profile, which they created for her. That feels like something that character will do. The kids might not look at it, but even if they don't look at it, it's something for the creators to aspire to in terms of what she does. And if the kids themselves do look at it, it adds extra relevance to her as a persona and someone to buy into.
Another thing that you thought was really interesting was the importance of immersive character journeys as well. Development of the characters, but also the idea of the characters existing within a robust and rich world.
As we all know, kids' media landscapes are progressing, evolving, expanding, and I think cartoons have to offer worlds that feel that they are rich, diverse, and there is the possibility to expand. And I think about when developing a cartoon, I think it's really important for creators to think about how that world or that character can evolve, whether that's, I don't know, different. It could be different planets, it could be a different setting, a different location, but something that feels quite big for kids to buy into.
Every strong media product, whether it be for adults or kids, works because it takes the consumer on a journey. And there's some things that stand out as signposting that a journey will be worth embarking upon. Maps. Things like Craig of the Creek starts off with a map which shows, even though he lives in a geographically small world, it's a world absolutely replete with possibility. And I think this is something that they've always expected, but they're increasingly coming to expect with games like Fortnite, which regenerate the whole time into new worlds and opens them up to new experiences.
Another big point that each of our interviewees talked about, Andrew, Sophie, Rebecca talked about, was just the importance of fun. It sounds like it's quite a basic point, but it also feels like it's quite crucial to kids' animation as well.
The thing that cartoons do best is take the normal parts of kids' lives and put them through a fun prism. Basically, the most fun things are reflections of the fun, weird parts of a kid's world. Andrew talked about heart, smart and fart. There's a reason that fart works. Everybody does it, and everybody under 10, at least in our groups, laughs at it.
From 15 years of testing kids' content, particularly cartoons, the power of the fart has never depleted. Always remember, they're kids, and kids like to have fun, they like to have a laugh, and cartoons are the perfect place to provide lots of laughs for kids. I would say that a key USP of cartoons is making kids laugh. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget about fun.
So finally then, I know we're a research agency. Obviously we're going to be talking about the strengths of research, but it does feel like, talking from Andrew, Rebecca and Sophie, that they all received a lot of value from going out and speaking to kids. Why do you think it's so important to be speaking to kids when creating kids' animations?
I think it's critical that you speak to kids. Kids are always going to be honest, sometimes brutally honest, and sometimes that can be hard for a creator to have to listen to, but ultimately kids are always going to improve your ideas with ideas of their own. So be prepared for honesty and be open-minded, but you will get some amazing feedback from kids.
You have to go out and meet a variety of kids to capture the reality of their lives. It's all about capturing the reality of a variety of kids' experiences so that can be put on the screen and kids see it and they go, oh yeah, that is a bit like my life now.
And don't believe that kids don't have opinions, because they really do. Kids want to be part of things, so enable them to be part of the creative process.